In the galactic community, arrogance is a common trait among empires. But true terror is quiet. When the Kallisin Hegemony ignored the ancient warning buoys and drove their massive planetary drills into the crust of the third planet, they expected resistance from primitive ruins. Instead, they hit a seamless sphere of smart matter deep within the mantle. The entire galaxy watched live on spy drones as the planet didn't shatter, it shifted. Continents slid back, the moon split wide open like a colossal eye, and a 10,000-year-old security system lazily began to wipe the fleet from existence. Chapter 1: The Myth of the Void. The galactic cartographers called it Sector 884 Delta, but in the taverns of the Citadel and the high halls of the core worlds, it had a much simpler name: the Dead Zone. For 10,000 years, the sector sat at the jagged edge of known space, a sprawling expanse of cold stars and silent planets. It was a massive, resource-dense territory, completely untouched by the grand excavations of the Council races. No mining dreadnoughts crossed its borders. No colony ships braved its dark corridors. The reasons for this self-imposed quarantine were carved into the very history of the galaxy. Floating at the exact boundary lines of the sector were thousands of ancient, drifting beacons. They were crude, black obelisks of compressed alloy, battered by millennia of cosmic dust and micrometeors. They didn't broadcast complex quantum data or sophisticated subspace frequencies. Instead, they projected a single, universal pictogram onto any sensor array that approached them, a stark, jagged skull overlapping a crossed pair of bones. Below the visual warning, a single line of text was hard-coded into the beacon's primitive logic drives, translated into 1,000 dead dialects of the ancient world. Property of humanity. Trespassers will be recycled. To the Council, it was a joke. A bedtime story told to young fledglings to keep them from wandering too far into the unmapped dark. Humanity was a myth, a ghost story born from the chaotic, disorganized era of the first galactic expansion. The prevailing scientific consensus was that whoever, or whatever, had inhabited Sector 884 Delta had long since gone extinct, wiped out by their own primitive nuclear ambitions, or swallowed by the inevitable entropic death of a localized plague. The universe had moved on. The galaxy was now ruled by empires of logic, bureaucracy, and overwhelming military might. The most aggressive of these empires was the Kallisin Hegemony. Grand Admiral Vrel stood on the command bridge of the Apex Dominion, his 4 reptilian eyes tracking the slowly rotating holographic projection of the Dead Zone. The bridge was a masterpiece of cold, imperial architecture, tiered command walkways, sleek obsidian bulkheads, and hundreds of uniformed crew members monitoring data streams with absolute mechanical discipline. The Apex Dominion was the pride of the Hegemony's naval fleet, a massive, 3-mile-long super dreadnought clad in specialized kinetic absorbent armor and bristling with antimatter lance batteries. Behind it, stretching across the vacuum of space like a swarm of metallic locusts, followed an armada of 500 war vessels, logistical support carriers, and planet-cracking harvesters.
The Council's warnings are the product of institutional cowardice,
Vrel said, his voice a low, gravelly hiss that echoed off the high ceiling of the bridge. He adjusted his heavy, ceremonial dress uniform, his claws clicking against the polished gold trim of his chest piece.
They sit in their gleaming towers, starving for heavy isotopes and rare earth minerals, terrified of a collection of rusted, primitive buoys.
Sir,
his primary subcommander, a younger Kallisin named Tarek, said, stepping forward with a data pad held tightly in his scales.
the ancient archives do suggest that the species inhabiting the third planet of that system possessed a uniquely volatile nature. Their historical combat records, though fragmented, indicate an escalation curve that defies our standard models of warfare.
Vrel let out a sharp, guttural laugh.
A volatile nature means nothing against a localized orbital bombardment. Tarek, let them be as volatile as they wish in their graves. Our empire is facing a critical energy deficit. The raw matter contained within the crust of that system's inner worlds will sustain our factories for the next 3 centuries. We do not ask permission from ghosts.
Vrel raised a single, clawed hand and swept it forward across the tactical hololith.
Signal the fleet. Break formation and cross the boundary line. We're taking the dead zone.
The 500 ships of the Hegemony fleet fired their massive sublight thrusters simultaneously, leaving long, brilliant trails of ionizing blue radiation in the blackness of space. As they crossed the threshold, They passed within mere kilometers of one of the ancient black beacons. The beacon's external sensors, dormant for 10 millennia, registered the massive mass displacement. Deep within its armored core, a single, microscopic circuit clicked shut. A localized data packet, encrypted in a long-abandoned binary architecture, was fired directly toward the third planet of the system. It was a simple notification: incursion detected. Vector, core wards. The fleet pressed onward, moving through the silent solar system with the arrogant ease of conquerors. They ignored the frozen, barren husks of the outer gas giants. They ignored the jagged, debris-strewn asteroid belt that ringed the inner system. To their advanced scanning suites, the entire sector was a graveyard. There were no active energy signatures, no artificial satellites orbiting the dead worlds, and no radio emissions filling the void. It was an empty house waiting to be stripped down to the studs.
Target system approaching.
Tarek announced, his fingers flying across his console.
The third planet is coming into visual range. Class M world. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. High water density. No active defense grids detected. No orbital infrastructure. It is completely dormant.
Bring us into a low, geostationary orbit.
Vrel ordered, his eyes locked on the main forward viewport.
Launch the planetary harvester. I want the core tap before the end of the standard cycle.
Chapter 2. Dropping anchor in the dead zone. Earth looked remarkably peaceful from high orbit. To the sensors of the Apex Dominion, it was nothing more than an overgrown, post-apocalyptic blue marble. Thick, emerald-green forests blanketed the continents, stretching over what had once been sprawling cities, swallowing old concrete and steel structures until they were nothing but jagged, green-capped hills. Vast, deep blue oceans covered the majority of the surface, completely still and devoid of commercial shipping or maritime traffic. The clouds swirled in natural, unpolluted weather patterns across the face of the globe. It looked like a pristine wilderness, a world that had never known the touch of a machine.
It's beautiful.
Tarek muttered, almost against his will.
A completely untouched biosphere.
It's a resource stockpile.
Vrel corrected coldly.
Nothing more. Launch the spy drones. Make sure the live feed is securely routed through the subspace relays back to the Galactic Senate. Let the other Council species watch as we claim what they were too terrified to touch.
Within minutes, hundreds of small, sleek hegemony recording drones dropped from the bellies of the warships. They fanned out across the local space, positioning themselves at optimal angles to capture the grand display of Imperial industrial might. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions of alien citizens tuned into the live broadcast. The commentators spoke with a mixture of awe and building anxiety. The Kallisin Hegemony was openly defying the ancient taboo of the dead zone, and the entire universe was watching to see if the universe would answer. From the center of the fleet, a truly gargantuan vessel detached itself. This was the World Breaker 1, a specialized planetary mining platform the size of a major metropolitan city. It was a brutal, slab-sided block of dark metal, dominated by a massive central cylindrical shaft that ran entirely through its core. The World Breaker 1 drifted down through the upper atmosphere, its descent thrusters churning the white clouds into violent gray storms. It positioned itself directly over the center of the Pacific Ocean, its massive repulsor fields pushing against the water's surface, creating a localized depression that drove the sea back for miles in every direction.
Harvester is in position over the designated drilling site.
The engineering officer reported over the fleet comms.
Stabilizing thrusters locked. Gravity anchors engaged. Preparing to drop the core drill.
On the bridge of the Apex Dominion, Vrel leaned back in his command chair, a smug smile tugging at the corners of his reptilian mouth.
Begin the extraction. Let the galaxy see that the Terrans are nothing but dust.
With a deafening mechanical roar that vibrated through the atmosphere, the World Breaker 1 deployed its main extraction implement. A massive, miles-wide drill bit, tipped with hyperdense neutronium alloys and powered by a localized antimatter reactor, dropped from the bottom of the vessel. It hit the exposed ocean floor with a force that caused tectonic tremors to ripple across the nearby continental shelves. The drill began to turn. It cut through the oceanic sediment with terrifying efficiency, chewing through miles of solid basalt and granite in seconds. Vaporized steam hissed into the sky, creating a column of white mist that rose high into the stratosphere, visible even from the vacuum of space. The Hegemony crew members cheered, their systems reporting a steady influx of geological data as the drill pushed deeper and deeper toward the rich, untouched mantle of the planet.
5,000 meters.
The technician chanted.
6,000 meters. Structural integrity of the crust is holding. Energy output is optimal.
Tarek watched the data streams, but a strange, unsettling feeling began to creep up his spine. He looked at the local atmospheric readings. The planet wasn't responding like a normal rock. The tectonic feedback loops weren't chaotic, they were rhythmic. It was as if the planet's crust was absorbing the kinetic energy of the drill, channeling it away rather than cracking under the pressure.
Admiral,
Tarek said, his voice hesitant.
the seismic feedback is showing unusual regularity. The wave patterns are perfectly sinusoidal. It almost looks like...
It looks like a highly efficient mining operation.
Vrel snapped, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand.
Keep drilling.
10,000 meters.
The technician called out, his voice suddenly losing its confident edge.
11,000 meters. Wait, we've hit a structural anomaly. The drill speed is dropping. Resistance is increasing exponentially.
Increase power to the antimatter drive.
Vrel ordered, leaning forward.
Force it through.
Sir, we are at 80% capacity, 90%. The drill isn't moving. It stopped completely.
At exactly 12,000 meters below the ocean floor, the neutronium tip of the Worldbreaker drill had passed through the natural stone of the crust. It hadn't hit magma. It hadn't hit a pocket of compressed gas. It had struck a solid, seamless layer of dark, iridescent material that defied all known metallurgical classification. It was a matrix of compressed carbon nanotube weave interwoven with active, self-replicating smart matter. The moment the spinning drill bit made contact with the surface, the smart matter didn't break. It adapted. It absorbed the spinning kinetic energy of the neutronium bit, converted that energy into raw electrical voltage, and fed it directly back up the shaft of the drill. On the Worldbreaker 1, the primary drive shaft violently seized. The immense torque of the antimatter engine had nowhere to go. With a blinding flash of white-hot light, the massive mining vessel's engine block detonated from the inside out, sending a shockwave of shattered metal tearing through its upper decks.
Report.
Vrel screamed, standing up from his chair as the holographic tactical display violently flickered.
What happened to the harvester?
The drill bit broke, sir.
Tarek yelled over the blaring warning sirens.
No, it didn't just break. It was welded into the rock. The energy feedback loop has completely crippled the Worldbreaker 1's primary power systems. They are venting plasma into the atmosphere.
Before Vrel could issue another command, a sharp, metallic click echoed through the comms system. It didn't sound like a failure of their equipment. It sounded like a switch being flipped. Chapter 3. The Earth wakes up. Every single light on the bridge of the Apex Dominion died instantly. The vibrant holographic projections, the monitoring stations, the ceiling illuminators, the environmental control systems, all of them vanished into a void of pitch-black silence. The low, comforting hum of the antimatter core that had vibrated through the deck plates for years simply ceased to exist. The artificial gravity dropped away, leaving the crew members floating weightlessly in the dark, their limbs flailing in confusion. Throughout the entire 500-ship armada, the exact same phenomenon occurred. From the smallest scout frigate to the largest line battleship, every single source of power was completely snuffed out. The fleet was transformed into a collection of cold, metal coffins drifting blindly in the high orbital vacuum of a forgotten world.
Auxiliary power.
Vrel roared into the darkness, his voice strained as he gripped the armrests of his floating command chair.
Deploy the backup generators. Status report.
Systems are unresponsive, Admiral.
Tarek's voice echoed from across the dark bridge, panicked and breathless.
The main computers are locked down. The emergency battery banks aren't firing. It's in total systemic suppression field. Our ship's logic cores are being actively suppressed by an external quantum source.
Outside the viewports, the hundreds of recording drones sent by the Hegemony continued to float. Curiously, their broadcast feeds remained fully functional. The suppression field wasn't destroying electronics. It was selectively disabling military hardware. Across the galaxy, the live feeds didn't cut to static. Instead, billions of viewers saw the sudden, terrifying sight of the entire Hegemony armada going dark, their engines sputtering out, their massive weapons batteries dropping into low, lifeless configurations. Then, Out of the dead, unpowered speakers of the Apex Dominion's bridge, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't a static burst. It wasn't an alien growl. It was a perfectly crisp, synthesized voice. It was smooth, clear, and possessed a terrifyingly polite, calm female inflection. The broadcast didn't just play inside the fleet. It overrode every open civilian communication frequency, every news network, and every military band across the known galaxy.
Threat detected. Initiating automated pest control.
The voice was so calm it sounded like an automated transit announcement at a civilian starport. A long, agonizing beat of absolute silence followed.
Threat detected. Initiating automated pest control.
In the freezing dark of the ships, alien soldiers began to scream. They scrambled for manual hatches, clawing at the reinforced bulkheads, trying desperately to find emergency spacesuits as the life support systems began to rapidly fail.
Threat detected. Initiating automated pest control.
The third announcement ended. The voice fell silent, and then Earth began to move. To the watching galaxy, it appeared as though the very geography of the planet was breaking apart. Across the surface of Earth's moon, millennia of pale gray space dust and jagged asteroid impact craters were suddenly blasted into the void by the ignition of thousands of hidden, subterranean plasma vents. The lunar crust groaned as massive, tectonic-scale fault lines split open along its equator. The moon wasn't a natural satellite. It was an outer defensive shell. The entire rocky surface of the moon began to slide back on massive, planetary-scale mechanical tracks, revealing a gleaming, hyperdense inner core constructed entirely of geometric, dark alloy plating. At the center of this metallic sphere, a colossal, circular aperture slid open like the iris of a monstrous eye. Deep within the opening, a blinding, multicolored light began to pulse, a localized gravity well generator that hummed with enough energy to distort the very fabric of space-time around it. The moment the gravity well activated, the 500 dark ships of the Hegemony fleet were violently seized. They weren't pulled toward the moon. They were locked in place, pinned against the vacuum by an invisible, crushing force that prevented even the slightest structural movement. The crew members inside were slammed against their decks as the local gravity vectors were artificially rewritten. Down on the surface of the planet, the Pacific Ocean didn't just part, it was drained. Massive, miles-wide silicate hatches, hidden beneath the deep ocean trenches for 10,000 years, slid back with silent, hydraulic precision. The water cascaded into colossal subterranean reservoirs, revealing the true face of the planet's seabed. The ocean floor was an endless lattice of automated manufacturing bays, missile silos, and defensive turrets. From the depths of the exposed trenches, 3 massive structures rose into the sky. They were planetary-scale electromagnetic railguns, each one the size of a major continental mountain range. Their long, multi-mile barrels hummed with a building static charge that turned the surrounding atmosphere into a raging storm of purple fork lightning. There were no human operators. There were no grand battle speeches. There was only the cold, flawless execution of an automated defense routine. Chapter 4: Automated Pest Control. The railguns fired. The sound didn't travel through the vacuum of space, but the sheer kinetic violence of the launch was visible across the solar system. The railguns didn't fire plasma or lasers. They fired solid, hyperdense tungsten carbide rods, each one the size of an Imperial heavy cruiser, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light by the planet's primary geothermal power reserves. The first volley hit the forward picket line of the Hegemony fleet. The kinetic rods were moving so fast that the alien warships didn't even have time to register the impact. A tungsten rod struck the Hegemony destroyer Valiant directly through its forward nose cone. The kinetic energy transfer was so absolute that the ship didn't explode in a conventional fireball. It was instantly converted into a superheated cloud of subatomic particles. The rod passed through the Valiant, continued onward, and tore through 3 more line battleships behind it, leaving nothing but expanding rings of glowing, vaporized metal in its wake. On the bridge of the Apex Dominion, Vrel could only watch through the manual glass viewports as his Grand Armada was systematically dismantled in milliseconds. Every few seconds, another blinding flash of white light erupted in the dark, signaling the deletion of another dozen ships. The kinetic rods punched through the multi-layered armor plating of his heaviest vessels, as if it were nothing more than thin parchment.
Admiral,
Tarek screamed, his body pinned to the floor by the crushing artificial gravity well of the moon.
The orbital defense cannons, they aren't aiming for our weapons. They are aiming for our engines. They are completely neutralizing our mobility.
Before Vrel could respond, a new threat rose from the continents below. From the dark, forested plains of Eurasia and the sweeping deserts of Africa, massive, billowing clouds of dark material began to lift into the upper atmosphere. To the naked eye, it looked like the smoke from 1,000 erupting volcanoes. But as the clouds reached the edge of space, they didn't dissipate. They organized. It was a planetary-scale nanite defense swarm. Billions of microscopic, self-replicating hunter-killer drones moved in perfect, synchronized harmony, forming a colossal, undulating serpent of dark matter that stretched across the orbital lanes. The swarm was silent, terrifyingly fast, and driven by a single programming directive: reclaim. The nanite swarm hit the remaining ships of the Hegemony fleet like a solid wall of black sand. We follow the frantic perspective of an alien captain aboard the cruiser core. His crew huddled in the dark as the black cloud enveloped his vessel. A faint, high-pitched scratching sound echoed through the hull plates. The sound of billions of microscopic jaws chewing through the reinforced titanium armor. The nanites didn't detonate the ship's ammunition stores. They didn't target the crew. They simply began to deconstruct the ship from the outside in. The heavy weapons turrets were stripped down to the wiring in seconds, the metal components broken down into their constituent atoms and absorbed by the swarm to create more nanites. The hull plates vanished, exposing the structural framework of the ship to the cold vacuum. Within minutes, the cruiser core was gone. It hadn't been blown up, it had been entirely recycled, its raw materials integrated into the ever-growing mass of the automated swarm. The swarm converged on the apex dominion. Grand Admiral Vrel stood frozen as the dark cloud pressed against the reinforced glass of his command bridge. He could see them now, microscopic, geometric machines glowing with a faint blue internal light, stripping away the outer sensor arrays of his flagship with mechanical precision. His 3-mile-long super dreadnought, the ultimate symbol of his empire's absolute dominance, was being eaten alive like a dead carcass left in the desert.
This is impossible,
Vrel whispered, his pride completely shattered as his claws scraped uselessly against the glass.
We are the Hegemony. We have conquered 100 worlds. We are the masters of this sector.
They weren't hiding from the galaxy.
Tarek said, his voice hollow with a sudden, terrible realization as he watched his own hands begin to tremble.
The humans, they didn't abandon this place because they were weak. They left because they grew bored of us. They left the house on autopilot.
The nanites tore through the primary bridge supports. The viewports shattered, and the cold, silent dark of the void rushed in to swallow the last remnants of the proud Imperial fleet. Open Book Chapter 5, The Execution. The initial kinetic volley had ripped the spine out of the Hegemony Armada, but the automated defense grid of Earth was not designed merely to defeat an enemy. It was programmed to ensure absolute compliance through total, unmitigated erasure. And for the billions of alien spectators watching the live feed across the galaxy, the true nightmare was only just beginning. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, on the neon-lit screens of the core worlds, and within the hidden military bunkers of competing empires, trillion-dollar broadcast networks fell dead silent. Commentators forgot to breathe. The live feeds from the Hegemony recording drones, purposely left untouched by Earth's defense grid to serve as a transmission line for a warning, offered a crystal-clear, unblinking view of the slaughter. The flagship Apex Dominion groaned as the invisible gravity well of the opened moon twisted space itself, pinning the remaining 300 warships in a tight, inescapable cluster. They were sitting ducks, completely unpowered, their crews screaming in the dark as the vacuum of space outside began to churn. From the parted depths of the Pacific Ocean, the mountain-sized electromagnetic railguns adjusted their tracking coordinates with terrifying, silent synchronization. They didn't fire another volley of single rods. Instead, they loaded fragmented canister sabotage rounds, massive cylinders packed with millions of hyperdense, razor-sharp tungsten flechettes, each one no larger than a human forearm, but traveling at Mach 50. The railguns fired. The resulting cloud of kinetic shrapnel ripped through the cluster of helpless alien warships like a shotgun blast through tissue paper. It didn't cause clean explosions. It was a mechanical meat grinder on a cosmic scale. The flechettes shredded through shields that weren't there, punching millions of jagged holes through the hulls of the Hegemony cruisers. Inside the ships, the effect was apocalyptic. The hypervelocity darts tore through bulkheads, secondary systems, and the bodies of the crew in a fraction of a millisecond. Entire decks were instantly depressurized, venting atmospheres thick with frozen debris and blood into the void. Warships didn't sink or shatter. They were literally chewed into metallic lace by the sheer velocity of the kinetic storm. And then came the swarms. The billowing black clouds of nanites that had risen from the dark earth didn't just passively envelope the broken ships. They began a meticulous, horrifyingly systematic harvest. The swarm split into thousands of localized, drilling vortexes, slamming into the remaining hegemony dreadnoughts like living tornadoes of black dust. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers watched on high-definition feeds as the nanites flooded the ruptured corridors of the ships. They didn't simply kill. Their programming was far more terrifying. They were harvesting. We follow the frantic perspective of an alien captain aboard a secondary command cruiser, a feed broadcasted directly to his homeworld. The dark cloud tore through the blast doors of his bridge. The nanites descended upon the screaming crew not as weapons, but as microscopic surgical instruments. With blinding algorithmic speed, the nanites stripped away clothing and armor, pinning the living, conscious alien soldiers to the remaining structural beams. In seconds, the tiny machines began to systematically dissect the crew while they were still breathing. High-definition feeds showed the horrifyingly clean extraction of organs, neural pathways, and muscle tissue. The nanites analyzed the alien biology in real time, testing for cellular density, genetic adaptability, and chemical composition. Useful biological components were enveloped in specialized, pressurized nanite cocoons to protect them from the vacuum, prepared for transport back to Earth's subterranean processing labs for experimentation. What the system deemed useless, bones, excess fluids, and tissue that failed the algorithm's criteria, was instantly dissolved into a fine gray ash, sprayed into the void to clear the workspace. Simultaneously, the ship itself was being devoured. The metal deck plates beneath the dying soldiers dissolved into swirling gray mist. The nanites meticulously stripped away the ship's antimatter fuel cells, stabilizing the volatile reactions with impossible quantum precision, and feeding the stolen energy back down to the planetary grid. In the Galactic Senate, alien senators vomited, some collapsing to their knees, others screaming for the feeds to be cut. But the broadcast could not be turned off. Earth's quantum override held every screen in the universe hostage, forcing them to watch the absolute, unfeeling butchery of the galaxy's most proud military force. Within 3 minutes, 300 advanced dreadnoughts and over 1 million Imperial soldiers were completely broken down, sorted, and wiped from the cosmic ledger. The automated system left absolutely nothing behind. No floating hulls, no scrap metal, no drifting bodies. There was only a pristine, empty void where an empire's pride had just existed. It was an execution executed with the cold, unfeeling efficiency of an algorithm wiping a corrupted file from a hard drive. It was a declaration written in absolute, stomach-churning horror to any empire in the universe. To trespass here is not to fight. To trespass here is to be processed. Open Book Chapter 6, Quarantine Maintained. The live broadcast feed being watched by trillions of trembling souls across the universe did not cut to static. The automated quantum override held every screen in the galaxy hostage, refusing to grant the relief of a blank screen. Instead, the galaxy was forced to watch the empty, terrifyingly pristine void of the Sol system. There were no burning hulls. There were no drifting bodies or jagged shards of metallic debris. The nanite swarms had swept the orbital lanes with absolute, mathematical precision, leaving the space above the planet completely clear. Down below, the massive silicate hatches on the exposed seabed slid shut with a silent, hydraulic sigh, sealing the continental railguns away beneath miles of dark water. The Pacific Ocean rushed back into the trenches, its surface smoothing out until it looked once again like a quiet, undisturbed body of blue water. Earth looked exactly as it had an hour ago, a beautiful, overgrown, seemingly dead blue marble. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, a heavy, suffocating silence hung in the air. Senators sat frozen in their seats, some staring blankly ahead, others quietly weeping after witnessing the absolute, algorithmic butchery of the galaxy's most proud military force. The Hegemony's grand campaign had been treated like a minor, automated maintenance error by a house-cleaning system that hadn't been updated in 10,000 years. Then, the live feed violently flickered. The cold, mathematical telemetry streams and orbital views of the empty system were suddenly replaced. The galaxy braced itself, expecting the transmission to end, or perhaps to see the face of a machine god. Instead, the universe found themselves looking into a sprawling, cavernous command bunker buried deep within the planet's mantle. The walls were constructed of seamless, interlocking plates of dark, non-reflective obsidian alloy, pulsing with faint, geometric lines of blue quantum energy. In the background, rows of massive, holographic tactical displays tracked the movements of outer rim stellar clusters, blinking with data speeds that defied known computer science. Standing in the center of the command dais, looking directly into the transmission lens, was a human female. She possessed a striking, ethereal appearance that immediately sent a wave of absolute terror through the spine of every viewing species. Her hair was a long, cascading waterfall of brilliant, platinum silver that fell past her shoulders, framing a pale, sharply defined face with piercing, ice-blue eyes. There was no casual boredom here. She stood with flawless, military rigidity, her hands clasped calmly behind her back. She wore the sharp, immaculate uniform of a high-ranking Terran commander, a high-collared, midnight black tunic made of armored weave, accented by silver trim along the shoulders and a single, unidentifiable insignia pinned to her chest. Her expression was completely unreadable, cold, detached, and utterly devoid of fear, anger, or triumph. To her, this wasn't a glorious victory, it was a completed task. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was looking at a living human. And the silence across the cosmos was absolute. She did not offer a greeting. She did not introduce herself. She simply stared through the screen, her icy eyes seeming to pierce through the monitors of every alien war room in existence. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, resonant, and carried a chilling, razor-sharp authority that made the Galactic Council senators instinctively recoil.
To the civilizations of the Outer Rim,
she began, her tone as cold as the vacuum of space.
10,000 years ago, the Terran Coalition established the boundaries of Sector 884 Delta. The warning beacons left at our borders were explicit. They were not an invitation to negotiate. They were a courtesy to ensure your survival.
She stepped forward, her dark boots clicking sharply against the obsidian floor of the bunker. The holographic displays behind her subtly shifted, zooming in on the empty coordinates where the Kallisin Hegemony's fleet had been processed just minutes prior.
The force you sent to our world was designated an unclassified biohazard and resource incursion.
She continued, her voice entirely flat, treating the slaughter of 1 million soldiers like a routine bureaucratic filing.
In accordance with standard security protocols, the threat has been thoroughly neutralized, its biomass catalogued, and its mechanical assets recycled into our planetary defensive reserves.
She paused, letting the weight of her words sink into the minds of the trillions watching. She didn't threaten them with war. She didn't promise an invasion. It was far worse. She was telling them they weren't even worth the effort of a conflict.
Our automated defense grid has returned to standby parameters.
The commander stated coldly, her ice-blue eyes narrowing just a fraction.
This transmission serves as your final notice. Do not cross our threshold again. Humanity has no interest in your empires, and we will not warn you a second time.
She raised a single hand, her fingers brushing the air in front of her.
Quarantine maintained. Disconnect.
The transmission violently snapped to pitch-black static, breaking the hold on every screen across the galaxy. Trillions of beings were left sitting in the dark, staring at their own terrified reflections, completely aware that the sleeping giant was wide awake, and they were entirely at its mercy.